backwards. You don't need that, do you, Kenny? All right, let's make sure Commissioner Carter, Commissioner Ellison. All right, let's officially bring us back to order, and I'll read the item as commissioners reassemble. Item number 5, 24-14, request to proceed the public notice and hearing with proposed revisions to the Yadkin PD River Basin Rule. And I'm going to stop there, and because you were here, Elizabeth, and let you go ahead with this, okay?
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Elizabeth Liebig, and I am in the Classifications and Standards branch. And today I'm here to ask the Commission for approval to proceed to public notice and hearing with proposed revisions to the Yadkin PD River Basin Rule, 15A NCAC 02B 0309, and associated regulatory impact analysis for the reclassification of portions of the Yadkin River, South Yadkin River, and associated tributaries to Water Supply 4 critical and protected areas and Water Supply 5. The request was received from Salisbury Rowan Utilities since they seek to construct a new intake downstream of their current intake. Part of the process of relocating the intake involves reclassifying several water bodies located in Rowan, Davie, and Davidson counties. Today, I'd like to present an overview of the Salisbury Rowan Utilities project and the proposed critical and protected area boundaries. I will also summarize the use and attainability study, the proposed rule, the certified RIA, and the projected timeline. So this is an aerial that shows an overview of the planned relocation project. The Yadkin River is shown at the top of the photo and flows from left to right. The South Yadkin River flows into the Yadkin River, as does Deals Creek, which are both shown here as well. The existing intake, which was constructed in 1917, prior to the completion of the dam and establishment of the reservoir in 1927, can be seen in the top left of the photo at the end of the blue line. This structure has been impacted by sedimentation issues and flooding. The proposed intake is approximately 2,100 feet downstream, below the confluence of the Yadkin and South Yadkin rivers. The new combined intake structure and pump station is shown in the aerial as the white rectangle in the upper right portion of the photo at the end of the red line. The infrastructure and new access for the proposed intake will be elevated and will be more resilient against flooding events than the current intake and infrastructure. However, both the existing and proposed intakes are within the High Rock Lake Reservoir as defined by the FERC license as 623.9 feet USGS datum and is within the normal operating limits of High Rock Lake. The proposed intake would draw water from a location further downstream than the current intake, so it will encompass flows from not only the Yadkin River, but also the South Yadkin River, Deals Creek, and associated tributaries. Therefore, this reclassification will result in changes to the current critical and protected areas. The purpose of relocating the intake is to improve resiliency of their water supply system and to maintain raw water supply capabilities during and following floods. There has not been a request to increase the water withdrawal. The proposed intake would have the same withdrawals as the current intake. Both the existing and proposed intakes are within the boundary of High Rock Lake Reservoir, as defined by the FERC license. This reclassification was approved by the Water Quality Committee in May to proceed to the EMC with alternate boundaries under Rule 02B, 0202, items 20C and 48C, which is shown on the slide. Subpart C allows the EMC to approve a different distance from the reservoir or intake for the critical and protected areas. DWR supports this approach based on the following information. A water quality study was conducted as part of the last FERC relicensing application. It concluded that the flow in the Yadkin River has a strong influence on the water quality of the upper 6-mile portion of High Rock Lake Reservoir. The proposed intake location is within this 6-mile area. In addition, a High Rock Lake watershed model performed by Tetra Tech in 2012 has determined that 89% of the flow that comes into High Rock Lake is from the Yadkin and South Yadkin rivers, which cross the proposed intake location. Contributions from other water bodies can be considered de minimis, as the main supply to the reservoir is from the Yadkin River. Therefore, DWR supports proceeding with this reclassification using an alternate boundary as allowed for under Rule 02B. The proposed critical and protected areas around the Yadkin and South Yadkin watersheds are designed to prevent pollutants from entering the proposed intake from upstream. So this map shows the existing and proposed critical and protected area boundaries. There are certain permitting and land use requirements that will reduce the risk associated with pollution that apply in critical and protected areas. This reclassification is necessary since the proposed intake location is further downstream and would encompass flows from surface waters that are currently not classified as water supply. These include the South Yadkin River, Deals Creek, and associated tributaries. The current critical and protected areas are shown here as the black hatched areas that surround the Yadkin River. This reclassification will dissolve the current critical area and establish a new critical area. It will also expand the current protected area to include the lands and waters that contribute flow to the proposed intake. The new critical area is shown here as the purple semicircle, which extends half a mile in a straight line fashion upstream and draining to the proposed intake, which is shown here as the red dot. The new expanded protected area is shown as the lands and water within the red boundaries and shaded in yellow. It includes most of the existing protected area and expands it to include the lands and waters from the South Yadkin River and Deals Creek and associated tributaries, extending a different distance from the new intake if adopted by the EMC. The only change to the existing protected area is that this northern boundary will be shifted south slightly since the proposed intake is located south of the current intake. Therefore, the black hatched area outside of the red border will not be included in the new protected area. The proposed protected area boundary extends 10 miles in an as the river runs manner, upstream from and draining to the proposed intake. It accounts for ridge lines of the watersheds and is delineated using highways for ease of codification. So once this reclassification is approved, the critical area will be the purple semicircle and the protected area will be the area outlined in red and shaded in yellow. DWR conducted a use and value demonstration study based on the proposed watershed boundary shown on the previous slide. It was set up to study the additional waters to be reclassified as water supply. The 4 monitoring locations shown as the purple markers on the map were sampled monthly from October through December of 2023 and were analyzed for the physical and chemical water quality parameters shown in the table on the right of the slide. The study concluded that the waters in the designated study area met the water supply 4 classification requirements. The study was included as attachment C. This reclassification proposal would update Rule 02B 0309, the Yadkin PD River Basin Rule. This table shows a summary of the water bodies to be reclassified. The full rule language with markups is included as part of the RIA and is provided separately in attachment B. So this rule change is a necessary step for Salisbury Rowan Utilities to relocate the current raw water intake to the proposed location. The Yadkin River, South Yadkin River, and associated tributaries contribute flow to the proposed intake location and all require a water supply classification. Local government ordinances from Rowan, Davie, and Davidson counties will need to be amended to reflect the land use requirements in the subject watershed areas. Each of these local governments has provided a resolution to DWR indicating that they will implement the water supply rules within their jurisdictions within 270 days after the effective date of the reclassification. The regulatory impact analysis found that this reclassification would have no substantial economic impact. The one-time estimated costs to local governments were determined to be $7,050 and to state governments $2,000. The RIA was certified by OSBM on June 11th, 2024, and is included as Attachment A. So if this action is approved today, the projected timeline is shown here. The next steps would be to go out to public notice. The public comment period is expected to be between mid-August and mid-October, with a public hearing to be held in October. We would then be back in front of the EMC next January for rule adoption, followed by RRC approval and EPA review. This timeline has not changed since meeting with Salisbury Rowan Utilities last summer and was agreed to by all parties. We are still on track and meeting all the milestones. So in closing, I'm here today to ask for EMC's approval to send the proposed reclassification of portions of the Yadkin River, South Yadkin River, and associated tributaries out to public hearing and notice. If the projected timeline shown on the last slide proceeds as is, the proposed reclassification's effective date is estimated to be March 1st, 2025. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Let me go to Commissioner King from the Water Quality Committee. Any additions to what we've heard or any different comments from? Not ready for a motion, just getting ready for questions here.
Yeah. Though the RIA was approved after our recommendation, the concern through the draft study of the RIA, though it happened a couple of maybe 10 or 11 days, it was June the 11th, after our meeting, there was a lot of concern with the agricultural piece. And they dove back into that during the draft piece. We had a couple of commissioners that were on the committee. And that is on 3.0. I think that's on page 6. If you'll bring that up, please. Page 6 on the RIA.
Don't.
3.0, if you got it.
I'm not sure if I'm able to bring it up.
That may take it.
Okay.
I think Mr. Nelson's going to come in and try to save us on that one, but
Okay.
let's see if we can bring the PDF. Let me do this as you finish your thought.
No, I'm finished.
I think also, I don't see Jim Beamer, I think maybe.
Jim Beamer is in the
Jim
audience.
Beamer, so I've just mentioned that if we have any questions, don't mind recognizing him, particularly since he's had to appear before the Water Quality Committee a couple times. So if there's any additional information from him, I don't mind recognizing him, but we will try to keep this to staff and Commissioner King with the Water Quality Committee for questions.
Just to finish out real quick, though, I wasn't going to spend any time on this at all, but I just wanted to make sure that the commission knew that even though we waited a couple of weeks, Mr. Chairman, it was to drill down on, we had enough time on the draft to drill down on the agriculture questions that were concerning for buffers and so forth, and that is on the critical area. That is on 3.0 on page 6. I just wanted to bring that up. So we did have.
Flyby, could you bring that up?
Which one, page 6?
Yeah, 3.6, I think he said.
Yes, it's 3.0 on page 6 under impact analysis.
Yes.
It's the last paragraph. It's at the bottom. Based on zoning current conditions in the area, the reclassification is anticipated have no effect on farming practices. But anyway.
Yes.
Bill, Commissioner Yarborough. Thank you.
Right.
That was it for me.
Okay. Any questions of staff or committee? Yes, Commissioner Ellison, we'll let you go first.
Just a quick question. The March 2025 effective date that you're projecting, is that still keep the municipalities in good shape for their funding schedule and everything else?
Yes, it does. So yes, we are still.
Just point out that's an issue.
Yeah, could you just briefly talk a little bit? We've heard this in committee, but there is a grant out there, about a $30 million grant and loan matching fund. And an EA or EIS has already been in process to make sure we get that money, or the Salisbury Ryan gets that money.
Correct. And their city council would then need to accept the funding, and the earliest they will be able to do that is in August. So that will start that 3-year timeline. So we aren't in that 3-year timeline, but Jim Beamer is in the audience and could give more information if you would like.
Yeah, I can ask you, but I mean, approving this today and keeping this on schedule assures that he can get his
Correct,
funding and his EA or EIS,
correct, correct.
all the lines dotted and T's crossed.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Carter.
Yeah, I'd like to go back and just understand a couple of things here better. Back on this, I'm looking at, I was about slide 3 or 4, the ones with you got a yellow area and a green area, and this reclassification applies to everything with inside the red. Now, am I correctly interpreting this that I guess it's kind of.
The green is in the
is-
area too. Yeah, if you're colorblind, you can't see the red, can you?
Yeah, well, I had to put my other glasses on. But the green is sort of the new aspect of this. The yellow was already in place.
So this black hatched area,
Yeah.
this is the existing. So this is what's already in place,
And it
So-
remains in place, correct?
except for this top
Yeah.
area, yes. And this will remain in place. And then since the South Yadkin and Deals Creek also contribute flow, we would be expanding the protected area to include portions inside this red line,
Okay,
and it's all shaded.
all right, I had it backwards. I'm sorry. I was confusing the Yadkin and the South Yadkin, I guess.
Okay, this one is the Yadkin.
How far does this doesn't extend into the town of Salisbury or Spencer, either one, does it?
No, it's, Spencer's down here. Can you see that?
Oh, okay.
So
thank
it's
you.
just north of the
That's right,
town of
we're up
Salisbury.
northwest of, all right, all right. Well, I have some particular interest. Salisbury is my hometown. My grandparents were in Spencer, so this is an area I know fairly well, but that's why I wanted to make sure I completely understood this. Now, let's go to your schedule here just a minute, because a couple questions I've got about this. I assume with a mid-October hearing, you're assuming that it would be too quick to get this to us in November, correct?
Correct. Yes, we expect some time
But
needed.
if they're good with, I take it with an August of next year, they're still okay with their funding?
Yes,
Okay, so that's not really a problem. The last two pieces of this, I'm not sure I entirely understand. I take it the March 2025, that's the Attorney General signing off on?
correct.
For what purpose?
Um,
I mean, once RRC approves it, aren't we done?
that would be the effect, when it's effective would be the first date of that following month. So the Attorney General would sign off on it and we would send it to EPA for their review.
Well, what is the Attorney General's review and sign off have? What's the purpose of that?
I am not sure if,
And I'm not sure, and the other question I've got is about the EPA review. I'm not clear on that either.
do you mind?
If I may, Chair Solomon. Paul Wojcicki, supervise the Classifications and Standards Branch. Commissioner Carter, so your question about the Attorney General's office sign off, that is a requirement by EPA and the federal rules because they're classifications are part of water quality standards. Yes, sir. And so as part of their requirements, they ensure that when states adopt new water quality standards, they make sure the state's Attorney General's office review those adoptions and have to certify that they were adopted in accordance with the rules and regulations of North Carolina.
And that's, I think you just answered my other question, which is since it's part of the water quality standards, that's why it has to go to EPA, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And that's why I have to go for an EPA review and certification.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith.
A couple of questions. One question is, I know this is in the text of the rules, I believe, but I'm not seeing clearly on any of the slides what the southernmost boundary of the actual water supply classification would be. So can you explain that part of it?
I'm sorry, the southernmost boundary?
Yes,
Is that-
of the actual water supply classification, not the critical area, but the actual water supply classification.
Okay, so right at the proposed intake would be the water supply 4 critical area. Following that, this classification of the Yadkin is a water supply 5. Does that answer your question or?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Right, so all of the waters inside this yellow shaded area would become a water supply 4 protected area. The purple area would become water supply 5 or water supply 4 critical area, excuse me. Following this intake, this is already classified as a water supply 5.
Okay,
So from the intake down the stem into the lake proper, it's all water
supply
classification
5.
5 already. Okay.
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Guess on page 8.
I'm trying to think. I just lost my other question. So thank you.
That's okay. We can
That's
come
good to
back.
know.
We can come back. Any other questions? Commissioner Derrick?
I just wanted to thank the members of the Water Quality Committee and City of Salisbury and the staff for the extra time that we took to make sure we understood the impacts and the coverage and the protection that this change would make, because we were taking an unprecedented route and using an aspect of the rule we hadn't used before.
Correct.
So I do think because of the extra time we took, it made our understanding better. It made the documentation better. So I thank you for that. And I would just point out and say that I would be curious in learning from Salisbury in the future, once this is installed, if they are seeing any adverse effects from the sand mine that is immediately upstream of the proposed intake area.
Good. Commissioner Smith, we'll come back to you. Did it come back to you or?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Tweedy?
I have a very minor question. On the use attainability report in attachment C, table 7 reports PFAS measurements that were
Right.
done. So a lot of numbers in that table are between 1 and 3.
Yes.
In other proceedings, we've been told the detection limit is 4 nanograms per liter. Are those averages is why they're less than that? Or
EPA's limit of detection was 4 parts per trillion. We were able to detect lower than that. But as you can see, those PFOA, PFOS were below what EPA's MCL is
Yeah.
for those chemicals.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll try, but I think.
I can help a little with this.
Yes,
John
you can
Kulik
Explain the question, right?
with the Deputy Director of Division of Water Resources. So the National Lab of Validation by EPA uses 4, but labs are starting to get lower, and not all labs so, but the national validation is 4. But other labs are starting to get lower, which is why in our report yesterday, I said, if they go to a lab that can do better in the PQL, they should report the actual value. But 4 is the national validation one, and that's why we're using 4 on PQLs when we
Okay.
talk about it.
Thank
But as
you.
we discussed yesterday, all labs are different, and they have better test procedures than others, some of them.
Okay, thank you. I did not understand that. That helped.
Yeah, and I don't want to pile onto that too hard, but again, that's why it's important when they say we've detected it in so many wells or surface water, at what level have detected that? Because we can detect it at different levels,
Okay.
higher or lower, so. That is a good, okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Baumgartner, did you have one, or Carter? I thought I saw a hand over here.
Well, I'm just trying to get a little bit of, make sure I'm clear on this. You would, the water supply 5 designation, you said extends downstream from the new proposed location, right?
Correct.
Now, I'm assuming if I see it correctly there, it extends down, it looks like just about to what I think is the I-85 bridge.
This,
No.
No?
this
can't-
brown area is the High Rock Lake
Oh, so
Reservoir.
it includes the lake. I'm sorry. I thought I saw it ending up
So
there.
I know the section leading
Yeah.
down into the main part is water supply.
I think your dam in 85 is further to the right down near the legend in that area.
Is this right?
Oh, yeah, no, the dam is way on down.
Yeah,
But right there, that's the I-85 bridge, I believe.
Yes, I
Yeah.
believe so.
So the 5 area,
Would be in here.
right? And it does not extend then beyond the bridge?
I would have to double check.
All right, that's fine. I just trying to get a clear picture. All right.
Okay, so hearing no other questions, Commissioner King, does the committee have a recommendation or a motion here?
The committee has approved it and the request, the Division of Water Resources request, EMC approved. Make that motion, bring it before you today to move forward to proceed to public notice and hearing with proposed revisions of 15A and CAC 02B, 0309, and associate regulatory impact analysis for the reclassification of portions of the Yadkin River, South Yadkin River, and associated tributaries to WS4 critical area, WS4 critical area, and WS5.
Okay, do we have a second on that
Second.
motion? Have a second from Commissioner Carter. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll, yes,
One-
Commissioner
One
Smith?
comment. I continue to have some discomfort with the fact that the shoreline, the critical area protection basically stops at the intake. The shoreline that's potentially affecting that intake does not stop at that point. And I understand the information about what the flows are in that area. But one of the reasons for the critical area is that we also recognize that non-point sources of pollution affect water quality, and that's the reason the critical area is designated. So I'm not going to vote against sending this to public notice. I think we need to be very, very careful in this and every other instance. If we're going to use this exception in the rule, to be sure that we're doing it in a way that is supported by actual water quality data that indicates that that more limited critical area is going to be adequate to protect water quality. And the flow information is important, but it's not the only factor that affects water quality. That's why we have critical areas to begin with.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Any other Commissioner Ellison?
Just refresh my
Well,
memory.
We got a motion in a second. We're not talking to staff now, we're for the members now.
Okay.
You want to address it to me or address it to all the other members, to Commissioner King?
My understanding is that Tetra Tech did a water quality model of this.
There was a water quality model done at some point. It's in the documentation. Hearing no other comments, then we'll call for the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. And as we break off of this one and move to the next one, I just want to go back to what Commissioner Deerhake said. Rulemaking and going through this public process can be long, no matter which side. Sometimes you want to go faster, sometimes you want to go slower. But I do think the hard work we've done in committee here has gotten this right. We were divided, some of us pretty sharp in the beginning, and maybe even staff too. And I think we've come together, as you point out, Commissioner Deerhake, by taking the time and grinding through it. And I think it's made a better product, and I think it's made for a positive vote for today. So I thank everybody for your willingness to work through this and listen to each other. So moving to the next item, which I think is my item now. Is that correct? Okay, so let me start off by saying, I'm not going to apologize, but I'm just going to say that this is highly unusual, what we experienced with this particular legislative action, which requires the start of preliminary and then permanent rulemaking, I guess. I believe it, I don't quote me wrong, I know the date to the governor, but on June 27th, I believe this officially passed the General Assembly in one of the last days of the short session. That was a Thursday. On Friday, the 28th, it was sent to Governor Cooper, and we all went off on vacation, including me and Director Rogers. On about Tuesday, we had seen this bill floating, this provision floating around, and didn't know where it came out. And about Tuesday, we figured out that, yeah, it had popped on this bill and that we needed to do something. So for everybody's notice here and for the public, we had to make an adjustment to the agenda for an information item out of the gate on that Tuesday or Wednesday before July 4th. So that's normally not the way we do it, but this was required by law to pursue this. Now, in my thinking, and we didn't talk that much about it, but my thinking was it had passed the General Assembly, but it had not become law yet. So even though this was due a response on August 1st, I wanted to get it on the agenda as an information item for the commission because I didn't know if or when this would be signed and officially law. We got back and Governor Cooper was on the ball as usual. And on Monday, he signed it into law, which meant on Tuesday, I was getting briefed by the department about the history here. And that is when we made it an action item. And again, to remind everybody, we can convert information items to action items. That's a harder route, but we can go from action and not have to take action if we don't need to take action. So it was safer to change it to an action item at the last minute than it was to try to go the other way. And so I changed it again and worked with council on that. But we wanted to make sure for public involvement reasons and public notification that although we were moving fast through this thing because we had to, that people were aware of what we were trying to do today. So a little bit, it's in your documentation. And I'm not going to go through the history in that much detail here, but I will give you a little history. There was a previous session law 2023-124. And some of you guys may remember that because that was a very, very similar bill to this one about discharging into low flow streams with domestic type wastewater. I'll just call it that for now. That went back and forth within the department and some stakeholder meetings, and we got a letter from EPA, the department did on February 6, 2024, and that's in your package. Okay, so apparently the General Assembly wanted some additional action, and so when they put this new bill together, they made some changes based on that letter and notification. That's my summary here. And they also stuck us into the mix as the EMC. That's kind of where the authorization actually originates from, although we don't do the permitting itself. So we got put into the mix. Now, reading the legislation, it says no later than August 1, 2024. As I understand it, different parties, as this was moving through in different ways, requested that change, but it did not get changed. So we have 3 weeks from the day. No later than 3 weeks from the day, this thing has to go to EPA in what I would call a conceptual framework, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But it's got to go to EPA in 3 weeks, and it's got to be joint between the department and the EMC, is what the official statute says now. Now, if you look at this, and I'll back up history, once this goes to EPA, assuming there's a positive response, or when there is a positive response, 20 days from that period, we officially start rulemaking. Okay, and the legislation says temporary and permanent rules. 20 days from when EPA approves some kind of framework here, right? So rulemaking is not started now. The language they used in the bill, which throws up red flags to everybody, is said draft rule. Draft rule. Now, I have went back to the legislative people that were responsible for sponsoring this and putting it in and said, you know, draft rule is rulemaking to us, to a lot of people when we hear rule, and they go, no, we intentionally use things that weren't in the APA as far as rulemaking. There's nothing about temporary, emergency, permanent rules here. Draft rule is meant to be more conceptual framework. That's the language, though. And so what we had talked about on Tuesday of this week was, because we were in a pinch and trying to comply, that we would take the language, and it is quite specific in the bill that you guys see, and have the department over the next couple of weeks pull that into something that's kind of ruly looking, right? And we may make some changes we need to make just because of the way we word rules or exceptions we have to put in rules. It really shouldn't match the legislation exactly, but it's going to have to be very similar to it. And because I do not want to call you guys back, I do not want to call you guys back in 2 weeks. And I don't think, with all the fatigue we've got from all the things we've read and all the things that are coming our way from PFAS and 1,4-dioxane saying that's about to hit us as well, and we got IBTs and we got nutrients coming, I just don't want to tax this commission. From the past, what I know is, having gone through the coal ash SOCs, it is hard to get everybody here in August, especially on 2 weeks' notice. You usually need about a month for a special meeting to even, make people aware. So I don't want to undercut. If we tried to bring everybody back together, we would tax you. And the other thing that would happen is, I'm thinking from experience, is we're going to lose a lot of you. So if the decision is we want as many people here to review this, then we've got to review it. We got to get here and review it. We won't have everybody, and then we got to go through a review loop. So I didn't see how we were going to make 3 weeks. And so what I volunteered to do, although I really don't want to do this either, I think it's my duty as chair to, if the department gets this done on the wall, I can look at it, I can include my name in the letter as chair and say the full EMC is going to review this in September in more detail, but that may check the box. And that's the recommendation I sent you guys to give me permission to go for 3 weeks with the department to get this thing in and just keep it moving. Now, I think there's another alternative here that we could do. We have met today, we have put it on an action item. If you guys don't want to do anything because we don't have time to meet, what we can do is just say we've met, that'll give us some cover, no other way to say it, that we met to consider it, and that we agreed we'd come back in September to review it and let DEQ just go about their own business and submit the ruling language to EPA so they meet their end of the obligation. So I think those are 2 ways. You can give the chairman the authority to do it on our behalf, or we can just wait till September and let DEQ do their thing. I think we'll still be okay legislatively. I've talked to people, but that is the commission's decision. But I do not want to call you guys back for special meeting just for this. So with that said, if I've got a question, yes, Commissioner?
Just a question, I don't know if it's even possible, but a lot of times when you have a bill like this, it's actually gets signed at the time that you can actually ask for a technical correction to, since the scheduling is so tight and we only meet X number of times and they're giving this directive, is the department even considered a technical correction, or would it be something we'd even want us to entertain?
But I won't ask the department yet, but I won't put them on the spot, but I asked for it.
Okay.
And there's just not enough time to make that happen. And then there may be some limitations on that too, since it's already in statute and stuff too. So that's the sticky part. And I know, Bill Lane, do you want to add anything to that, or anybody from, I think that's consistent though. There's not enough time for technical correction even. Is that right? He's saying yes, there's not enough time. Okay. Right. Right. So good question. Commissioner Carter.
Let me follow up on that. So I agree, there's certainly not time before August 1, but if you've already requested it, and we don't know when, I guess, the legislature may reconvene sometime after August 1, that's, I think, pretty clear at this point. Your approach, or the second approach you suggested with the department moving ahead with what they can do, we've requested you've requested a technical correction.
No, I've inquired about it.
I'm sorry.
There's no way to request the technical commission formally
No?
like that. No, it's,
Why not?
I've asked some legislative leaders, could we get one? And I got an answer. That's not a formal request.
No, I understand that, but I guess my question is, why can't we request it formally? You can't send a letter to the legislature saying this is just too tight a deadline. Please modify this deadline. We're going to let the department proceed and we will take it up in September. But we need you to ratify or modify this date and make it, pick a date, October 1, November 1, whatever.
My understanding is they would like to move on this, on the schedule they've got it. And again, I can't speak for the whole General Assembly, and they're
No, I
not going to be
understand.
back. So I want to be careful that we try to be responsive to what's in front of us. It's not an easy move. We've inquired about it, I think.
But they at least understand we're unlikely, let me say this a little carefully, to be able to do anything by August 1. So September meeting, whenever that date is as early as we could formally act on this piece of
As far as an
legislation.
entire EMC,
Yeah.
yes. If it is joint,
Yeah.
there's even talk that maybe we shouldn't even been in this front piece either, but
Right. I would
this
disagree
was
with
done
that.
at the last minute. So it is what it says, and I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can kind of do your thing to let the department go and us wait, or do you let me just say the chair looked at it at the last minute and can write in a paragraph there that the chair of the EMC looked at it? That's as close to qualifying as the EMC looked at it as I think we can do. Commissioner Smith.
I think your second option is the better option, which is to report on this discussion and that the EMC simply cannot move on rule drafting that quickly, but we'll continue the conversation in September. And the department can do what the department does. You know, I do think we've got another problem with this. It's partly a problem and partly a potential answer to this question. The session law itself sets out all of the criteria. We're not allowed under the APA to adopt a rule that repeats legislative language. And unlike some provisions of this sort, this does not say the session law expires when permanent rules are adopted. So I think we've got an APA issue to begin with, is whether we can do a rule that actually repeats everything in this session law, which raises the question of whether we can't meet the intent of the legislative request for EPA review by submitting the session law. I think we've done that in some similar cases where the state law is very specific. The state laws are part of our approved water quality program along with the EMC regulations. Of the first two choices you mentioned, I think your second option, I think, would be preferable, but I think it's worth considering whether we can simply submit the session law for EPA review, because we're going to have to figure out that APA issue at some point.
Okay, let me try to, I just want to answer that just a second, because I don't want to say too much or too little here. My understanding is the last session law got submitted as session law, and that's why we got included in the draft language got put in there. They just don't want the session law being thrown over the rail again. They've changed the session law, but they want it to look like a rule or a rule framework. That's what I understand. That's not written anywhere, but that's why I understand the draft rule language is there, and it doesn't say throw the legislation over the wall. So I understand what's been done in the past, and it was done on the previous bill. I think they're moving in a different direction. But your comment is valid, and the approach is one we can choose. Other comments, Commissioner King?
You mentioned conceptual. In the conceptual, there's a difference between conceptual and draft, isn't there?
Well, in the sense of what I was told by the legislative folks is that, and DEQ confirmed this, is they didn't intentionally use the rules that would trigger the APA, like temporary or permanent or even rulemaking. Draft rule, it is not the term we would use as rulemakers because it triggers things in our minds. But they have given us dates to when the APA process for rulemaking starts. So this is, to me, I look at this as more of a stakeholder process. When we go out and show rules to people and say, do you guys agree with this? Is the concept right, or is the framework right? So it's a draft rule that we're getting stakeholder input.
Yeah, that's for clarity for me.
Yeah.
Is that conceptual, preliminary, final. I mean, that's just the way government works. But conceptual, that's not going to be draft.
Well, I didn't say.
You said conceptual.
I'm trying to frame it in my language where you can understand. It's not that we have to draft the rule. We're not required by August 1st to take it to your committee and then back to the EMC and out.
Right.
It's not even admitted anything close to that. But in a stakeholder process, right, it's not uncommon for us, like in rules review and readoption, to have rules that are there in marked up versions that people comment on before rulemaking actually starts.
So if you put something together, it's going to be conceptual.
It's going to be rulesy. I think Director Rogers rules that term rulesy. It's going to look like a rule, not like a legislation, but it's not going to be a final rule. Is that, we're trying to thread a needle here, guys. I'm trying to be responsive for the EMC being involved. That's what I'm trying to do. So, and again, lack of confidence in me to do that, that's fine. I don't take it that way. I'll let Commissioner Duggan, as the vice chair, kind of, y'all can work those issues out, but I'll answer any questions you guys got at this point. Commissioner Baumgartner. Commissioner Ellison.
There was a letter sent from the department to EPA regarding questions on the narrative standards. The EPA's response was very helpful. And I was just wondering if a letter co-signed by you and the department with some rulesy language, just in a letter format going to EPA, with a copy of the legislation and maybe a couple of items in the language that we might suggest, if that would meet the requirement of the statute. Because I think having the chair sign a letter, it's an official act of the commission in a sense, but it's not too rulesy. It's only a little rulesy. And thank you for expanding my lexicon.
Well, and I think we did talk originally about maybe more of a letter type thing, but we don't want to just put a letter with the legislation behind it. We need to get it over into some form that looks like it would be a framework or something. But it's not a rule. We're not writing a rule yet. We're not authorized to write a rule. By the statute, we're not authorized to write a rule yet.
Understood, but a letter requesting EPA
Comments
Comment.
on these ideas, yes.
that would not meet the.
Yes, I think that would. I
Okay.
think that would. I think that's where we're trying to go.
Okay.
So, a question.
Yes.
So with a partnership with DEQ then, is the authority coming from the Secretary's office then?
Well,
It's joint
ultimately,
effort. Is that signature on DEQ, is that going to come from the Secretary?
well, technically it is under her authorization, but it is delegated to the division director. So I'm assuming it's going to be probably Director Rogers and my name mentioned or my name co-signing with Director Rogers. But ultimately, yes, the authorization is given here at the highest level, and here you would be giving me, if that's where the question's going, you'd be giving me the authorization to sign.
Okay, I would like to just respond. I think it smooths the unity within the commission and of you. But if you do it out there on an island, but now when you're partnered in with, in concert with the department, then when the secretary is signing off with you, then I've got more trust in the whole piece being a conceptual piece. And I don't have an issue with you being in there and doing that. If that makes any sense.
It does. It does. I just don't know how we can assure that at this point. We can't get.
Because you said it was, they're asking for us to partner with.
Well, it says EMC and the Environmental Management Commission, Department of Environmental Quality, Department of
go.
Environmental Management Commission. And within our organizations, we delegate those authorities up and
We
down.
do, but. Only
Okay.
delegating authority.
Commissioner Tweedy, you might be, you might not.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I honestly don't understand the underlying issue, but I'm not even sure that's a real important point right now because there's been a legislation of thou shalt do this. But the way you presented the two options earlier, maybe I was just reading into it. It sounded like it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That there wouldn't be a huge penalty or a problem with waiting till September and more time. So in my mind, maybe that's the better, if there's not a negative consequence to that, nobody's going to have egg on their face. Maybe maybe we don't need to rush this. Just my
I'm not
thought.
saying, I can't, go to attorney, it's a law now. So we have to go, in the pecking order of the law, this is not something where we got to enforce something tomorrow, and they need our prompt passage tomorrow. But it's higher than a report or a letter or something that obviously gets delayed often. It's somewhere in between, but it is a statute, which makes it very important. Okay, Commissioner Baumgartner.
I agree with the rulesy letter to check the box because if I'm reading this correct, there's a whole nother layer to this thing. September 1st, 2024, a collaboratory convenes. They go through a process of reviewing, I guess, the rulesy letter at this point. That's the way we're saying this. The ERC by the 15th of 2025. And then the EMC begins a formal rulemaking process, if I understand it. So not only do we meet the August 1st deadline with the rulesy letter, there's a whole other process that is in this law now that's going to take place later on. That's already been dictated, so.
Right. Mr. Smith. Oh, Commissioner Reardon, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm hearing quite a bit of consensus around with the sensitivity you have on the deadline here to get this done in combination with the department with an obligation to bring it back to our September meeting. I'm hearing some consensus here for you to take on that responsibility. How do we, is there what, do we formalize that in some way to authorize you to do this with the sensitivity you have? And I'm hearing from Commissioner King and Baumgartner and others, some consensus here for you to take on that responsibility to co-sign this rulesy-like letter with the secretary or her designee. What's the step forward here?
I'll call for a motion in a minute.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith?
I think we just need to be very careful since the Administrative Procedures Act lays out a very specific process for rule adoption, that we not send something prematurely to EPA that looks like a draft EMC letter that in fact has not even been through any, or EMC rule draft that has not even been through any discussion by commission members, not in committee, not in the full commission. So a letter that sort of forecasts what a rule would need to include based on the legislation, maybe. A rule draft, I think, is a dangerous thing to do for many reasons. And so it's a fine line to walk. I think it would be much better to have additional time. We already know, based on communications with EPA, that EPA believes this legislation is fatally flawed in terms of Clean Water Act consistency. So we just need to be very careful about what we're putting out there and what it's claiming to be at a stage when we haven't even approached the first step of a rulemaking process.
Understood. And just for clarity for everybody, the session law is different. They've listened over the past year and tried to change it, but it is the same topic and some of the same ideas, but it's some new stuff too. So I don't want everybody to think it's exactly the same legislation. It's not. It's been refined based on what they've learned, but there will still be concerns, I'm sure, right? So Commissioner Carter?
Well, I guess I think I'm combining what Commissioner Smith just said and Commissioner Keene earlier. I think then what should meet that, both ideas is the conceptual approach, I think, that Commissioner Keene is talking about, which is not a draft rule. I agree with you. We do not want to be sending them anything that remotely looks like a draft rule, but that lays out the general principles and so on and so forth that would be included ultimately in a rule. And I think that meets your thought, unless I'm mistaken.
No, that's basically the idea. I think that's the furthest we should even think about going.
Yeah. And I guess we will leave it to our creativity. I mean, I'm hearing what everybody's saying. I know the department's listening to this. We need a rulesy looking letter that's not looking like a pure rule, but it's not going to like just legislation thrown over the wall. Well, we know that's not the intent.
Conceptually, and I'm in favor of approving a joint signatory here with you and Director Rogers as well.
Yeah, and my intent would be, because they do the actual permitting, we do the rulemaking, I would probably put it on their letterhead at this point, so there's no misconception that it's ours, because this whole EMC will not have seen it. So I don't want to put any misconception that we have seen it or started rulemaking.
Yep.
Okay. Let me go to Ellison, then to Tweedy, then I'm gonna get a comment from Richard if he's got one, and then we're gonna go to a motion. So
Just quickly, to Commissioner Smith, you said we know from EPA that this is not a good idea or something to that effect?
There had been an EPA letter, which I believe was that not attached?
it was attached and
Um,
phone calls.
In response to earlier drafts of this same legislation that laid out significant EPA concerns about this bill.
Similar legislation.
Similar legislation,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. The other thing I want to point out is this rulesy letter needs methodologies and permitting processes as mentioned in the statutes. This is it's a tall order under a normal rulemaking process if we were directed to make this type of rule, let alone get something out the door in 2 weeks.
Right, exactly. Have one more, Commissioner Tweedy, and then we'll call for a motion.
Just final comment. I'd like to ask as much transparency in this process as possible. If there's the ability to review drafts that can be sent to the commissioners, I mean, even if it's a request in 24 hours to provide comment or something.
Absolutely.
I would
As soon
appreciate
as we have something going, I just don't want it to restrict us getting it out. And I want to observe too, if we ask for comments, we got to respond to comments. So I'd like to give it to you for awareness. and come back on the 18th, and we'll tell the EPA in the letter, that's what we are doing as a commission. But we're not starting formal rulemaking. Commissioner, we'll go to Commissioner Deerhaken and then Commissioner Rogers, or
Thank
Director
you.
Rogers.
I'm really disappointed that the leaders in the legislature have put the EMC in this position. I don't think it's necessary. I think it also is disappointing that we're starting to see very prescriptive session law coming to the EMC instead of trusting in the EMC to actually develop the rule language with the department. So I would just point out also that there are no circumstances like this described in our, what some people call it bylaws, other people call it operating procedures for the EMC. So this falls outside of that. And so as a result, I think the second option that you offered, if we have to take an approach, would be more consistent with how we normally operate.
Okay, I'll go to Director Rogers. You may not want to say anything, but I think it's probably fair to this eye of the needle thing we're going to have to do
I
here.
do
You
appreciate
feel
the
comfortable?
clarity that the commission has brought to the situation. No, we want to comply with the law as well. So we're really want to work with y'all in order to get this done and begin the process that's been given us through the legislation. So we're here to work with you and appreciate the direction.
Commissioner Reardon, you have a motion?
I do. I'd like to bring a motion to the table, a motion to authorize the chairman to work with the department to meet the obligation of the legislature with submission of the letter to EPA as required. That's correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Mr. Duggan, second. Discussion on the motion. Yes, Commissioner Deering,
Is this motion supposed to represent your first approach?
the first approach. And it's okay, guys. Again, we're in a rock and a hard place, and I'm trying to do my duty, so
And
vote
I'll
it
probably
with your
vote
conscience.
no, because I think it's outside the bounds of our operating procedures.
That's fine. That's what we have to do. We got to vote with our conscience on what we think's right. So we got a motion on the floor. No further discussion. I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Deerhake's opposed. And I appreciate that, guys. It's a tough one for us, but I think this discussion, as Director Rogers says, has been beneficial for the department too, because we have to work together on this. So thank you very much. Let me make an adjustment to schedule, and I'll go to council for just her opinion if she has one. You don't have to have one, by the way. But we are moving the civil remission penalty up. The person is here, or the entity is here.
Oh.
So instead of 2 o'clock, we're going to move that up to 1 o'clock. That assuming we can get through this last topic within the hour and the director comments, we'll break for lunch at 12 or 12:15. And then civil remissions group will start at 1 p.m. instead of 2 p.m. With the person here, everybody's fine with it. So our normal rule is within 15 minutes either way, but since everybody's here and they're willing, we're going to move that to 1 o'clock. I'm sure everybody will be happy to get on the road earlier, right? Okay, so now let me start the information item on the agenda. And guess what? It's not too unrelated to what we just talked about. It's interesting that way. So let me start off, where this is going, right? So nobody's sitting around wondering. I've talked to departments about this. We're not trying to bash ourselves or bash the department or any regulated person. This is really a conversation that we just need to have that we haven't had in a very long time. It's something that has been around, but really I saw it earlier in the year with the aquaculture issue, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And Keith Larrick's here to talk about that. So I want 3 people to be very brief. There's no presentations here, but where I want to go with this is let you guys see it. And then I'm going to send it to committee. But the reason I want to have the conversation today is so you guys know why I'm sending it to committee and why the public knows why I'm sending it to committee. And it's no great mystery. It's no great bad thing or anything. It's just something we need to do. So what you have in your package that was referenced here, legislation, was 143-282. And I've got copies of that. You guys got the orientation. You guys need copies. We want to see copies of this. This will be brief. You do? Okay. So let me pass that around. Let me keep one copy in front of me going. What this says, 143B-282, Part A, Part 1, Part A says, well, Part 1 says, within the limitations of General Statute 143-215.9 concerning industrial health and safety, which is covered somewhere else, the Environmental Management Commission shall have all the following powers and duties. A, off the bat, to grant a permit or temporary permit, to modify or revoke a permit.
282, it's 215.
This is 282.
Right.
Page 1, B under 1.
Well, I've got another one here that's 215.1. Was there a reason why? that
You
was
got,
ordered?
you got a lead copy then. I'm gonna give you that one in a minute.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Okay? So
Put
282,
that up here.
quick point, A says to grant a permit or temporary permit, to modify or revoke a permit, or to refuse to grant permits pursuant to 143-15.1 and 143-215.08 with regard to controlling sources of air and water pollution. Okay? So again, from orientation, you guys, I think, had 215.1, and I'll send that around too, just so you can put it in your hands and we can see it. 215.1 really gets into really your discharge permits, activities for which Part A permits are required except as provided in subsection A6. Basically, following activities unless the person has received a permit from the commission or has complied with all conditions to put the permit forward. So you can't do anything without us approving, the commission, us, these things. And there's a list of things on page 1. I've only given you 5 pages here. But if you go back to Part B on page 3, about midway, it says commission's power as to permits. The commission shall act on all permits, blah, blah, blah. And you can read 1, 2, 3 quickly for now, but basically what it says is we have full authority to deal with permits and particularly water discharge permits. That's the gist of this for the audience. Okay. Now, just to give you that piece was not necessarily in your packet of information, but this piece is, this is the actual 02A 0150 rule. Okay, so this is a rule. Those were the statutes. That was the statute authority of the EMC. And these are the actual rules. And that's a shortchanged it. And this is the delegations of authority. Okay. Environmental Management Commission therefore resolves that whenever these resolutions rule exists, basically has all the delegations of the authority of the commission in part 1, 2, and 3. The department has those delegations for permits. Even though the statutory obligation is under the EMC, we have given that by rule, not by statute, to the department, right? Nothing hidden, nothing, just going to give you background. It's by that rule. Now, based on that rule or vice versa, we have an MOA with the EPA that says this is how we will do like an MPDS discharge program. Okay, so there's an MOA out there too that's got conditions in it that states that the delegated authority and whatnot. I don't have that with me. I'll let the committee look at that later. Which brings us to kind of today and the 3 presentations, but things that we have to see here. And I don't know how many of y'all actually see MPDS permits at different times, but let me give you this one. And this will be the first one from Keith Larrick. They'll talk about on the aquaculture, just so everybody sees the reference. And this is a legal document, but what it says in the middle as this comes around on, and this is a general permit for aquaculture. In compliance with provisions of North Carolina Statute 143-215.1, which we just saw, other lawful standards and regulated, prominent and adopted by the North Carolina Environmental Management Commission and the Federal Water Crew Act as amended, blah, 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 by receipt of certificate of coverage issued by the Environmental Management Commission to allow discharge of wastewater, blah, 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 the permit is issued. And in this case, this one goes back to 221, when Jeff Popart was still here. Jeff Popart signed for Danny Smith Director of Division of Water Resources by authority of the North Carolina Environmental Management Commission. All of that proper, right, and truthful, so I'm not arguing that. The question before us today is we're involved in the setup of this, but all these permits are being signed off by the authority of the North Carolina Management Commission, and we don't know what's in the permits. So that's kind of the question of the day. It's not saying it's wrong. It's just saying that's what's happening. And so as I get with these three presentations or discussions that are coming forward, I'll give you a little bit of background. The first one is one that was brought to us in December that we became aware of. And I think at the time our two new ag members got involved in this, or at least Joe did. But there was about a 5-year, what I'd call a little battle going on about aquaculture on a general permit. And that general permit, I'll tell you about it in a second. But that's one that actually came to us, right? The next one we'll share is one that was given to us in March by Greensboro and talking about 1,4-dioxane, right? But what they did in part B of that, that's in our stuff, and I have it on my computer, it talks about the Greensboro story. And there's about 5 bullets back there that Elijah will talk about in a few minutes that basically says what they've had to go with permitting. And again, I'm not trying to kick anybody on that process, but just that, what they had to go through to do that. And then the third one, those two you've heard of, and you actually heard of one today earlier, where we're involved in the permitting part of this thing, right? Developing the rules and maybe because they can't get permitting worked out. But the third one you'll hear today is from Brunswick County. And I brought that to you because I think we haven't heard of it yet, but we're very likely to hear from it, possibly from legislation or General Assembly or legal or something, that we may hear from that one in the future. So I just thought that was a good third one to bring to frame this whole issue. And that's a general permit and 2 individual permits. 2 have already become before us, and try to put a little bit more understanding on that for you guys and the public. So I'm gonna stop talking. Has this been good background for everybody? Okay, so Keith Larrick is here. And as he comes up, Keith's going, oh no, I gotta come up here. Keith, actually, come on up, Keith, it's all right. Keith Larrick is with Farm Bureau, and he's well known to many of us. But Keith had to do a presentation to the General Assembly, as did Director Rogers, on this issue of aquaculture. And I'm gonna try to explain it real quick, Keith, and let you clean it up, because I don't want you don't need to be there more than about 5 minutes and say what you need to say. What happened here was there was a general permit that you saw that was previously done. The department decided, because of nutrients and whatnot, there needed to be more parameters put on it. More parameters were put on it. And I would argue, as maybe some of the affected parties did, that this is starting to look more like an individual permit than a general permit, because there's a lot of cost. The RIA left out all of the, or most of the labor for the sampling. And so I believe Farm Bureau and NC State did separate studies. And I think, Joe, you were, may have been involved in this one as it was happening when you were at Ag. But Farm Bureau and NC State did separate studies and said, yeah, we don't have all the costs accounted for the labor. And the rule went forward anyway. Okay, we didn't know anything about it. Department went forward. That's fine. That's their prerogative in this case. But it went to the General Assembly. And the General Assembly said now that because of this, that this rule controversy is going on, y'all need to get involved, because now the EPA is involved, and the EMC, because of your delegated authority, needs to be part of this process. And so that's when I got involved, and it was very positive thing so far with Keith and the Farm Bureau, with our ag community, with the department. I don't want to say anything negative here, because I don't think anything negative's been there, but it does signal that basically what happened was, because there was no other relief on this back end or no way to talk to us about it, it went to the General Assembly. And that's a concern to me, especially when all this is being done in our name. So Keith, please clean that up for me and move forward. I tried to make it simple for you, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Solomon. My name is Keith Larrick. I'm Natural Resources Director at North Carolina Farm Bureau. And yeah, I am here to talk about the aquaculture NPDES general permit. So yeah, it did become an issue first in 2018 and then in 2021. It was up for renewal, and there were conditions added to that permit for increased monitoring parameters and increased frequency for all the farms under that permit. And we're talking 30 or so trout farms that operate under this permit. There are some other farms in the eastern part of the state, but generally this controversy was related to trout farms in the western part of the state. So again, the conditions, we're going to add several $1,000s to the annual cost of these farms. The growers felt like, hey, we could take that money and use it to put in best management practices to actually reduce the impact of any discharges. There are several farms that have done that. Some of them have gone through Department of Agriculture's cost share program. Some of them have just fronted that bill themselves. So the permit did go into effect with those increased parameters. Some of the trout growers in that area of the state did approach their representatives asking for some help. That version of help was a provision put in legislation last year that went into effect, essentially requiring DEQ to scrap the 2021 permit and go back to the previous permit. You just had an agenda item about EPA and the legislature. The EPA did not take kindly to the legislature dictating exact terms of an NPDES permit. They have filed an objection to that draft permit. DEQ did what the legislation told them and developed a draft permit that went back to the previous version. EPA objected to that. I think that's not a surprise to those of you who just sat through the previous agenda item. So even if that permit did go forward, if DEQ made it final, it would not be effective for EPA purposes. So in the end, we're kind of in this kind of sticky wicket where the legislature has told DEQ to do something, EPA has said, you can't do that. And the farmers have kind of got themselves caught in the middle. I would say in the meantime, some of the farmers, Farm Bureau, Department of Agriculture, and then DEQ and EPA even have kind of gotten together working on kind of a middle ground proposal that EPA would accept, that DEQ feels good about, that the farmers feel good about. And really looking at something where smaller farms would have less monitoring because those are really the ones that would have gotten hit by those increased costs. So we are working on that. We had some site visits in the western part of the state. The DEQ staff, 3 days of their time out in the western part of the state by the time you include travel. So I do want to give them some credit for really working on this. So we were able to kind of show, hey, here's the limitations these farms are dealing with based on size and just where they operate in the western part of the state. I would say, the 2018 permit, it required one annual grab sample for 3 or 4 different parameters, which frankly doesn't provide that much information. So looking at it from DEQ's perspective, I think the farmers can see why maybe there needs to be more information provided, but they just felt like what was proposed was way too much. And so now we're working on that middle ground. The EPA seems to be kind of generally on board with that if we can figure something out. So I guess, as you said, the topic is sort of what is the commission's role related to NPDES permitting. There is an NPDES committee that already exists. I don't know, if you look at the general statutes and the MOA that already exists with EPA, it references the commission's role, as far as being kind of the overseeing authority. So maybe there could be a role that the EMC plays. I don't know if that would happen during a public input, public comment process. Also recognizing you all work for free. So you probably don't want to get involved with every NPDES permit, but I think there could be some opportunities when a regulated community feels like they've just kind of hit a loggerhead where they can't move forward, maybe there could be a role for the EMC to play. So, we'd be happy to provide comments down the road if you're interested in that. And, happy to answer any questions. I think the bottom line is obviously, these farmers went to the legislature. It did get everybody to the table, but it also hasn't worked out like they hoped it was going to work out either. So I think there needs to be another way versus going to the legislature, definitely.
Okay. And I'm not going to take a lot of questions, Keith, but I got one from Joe, and I know he's ag and he worked on this. So Joe, a little bit of leash here, but I don't want to get into the process or bashing anybody here or not bashing or praising. Just trying to, how can we be more constructive in the future?
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this, and I won't get into any of that, but I will add a little context here. We as a society today of over 300 million people in our country, over 57% of all our fruits and vegetables are imported into the United States today. In the context of the trout that he's talking about in the aspect of seafood, 97% of all the seafood that you will consume here in the United States is imported into the United States. And so understanding very pragmatically the challenges on these permit holders and understanding that Farm Bureau as well as NC State looked at this, and some compliments to the department to see if we can find some middle ground here, I think is most responsible. We want clean water, a clean environment, but we also want to produce the food we eat in this country. I promise you what's produced domestically with the regulatory oversight is a lot more than what you might have internationally. In fact, with seafood, a lot of what comes out of Southeast Asia is loaded up with antibiotics, but the very, very nature of how they grow seafood in that country. And so though it's not specifically speaking to what Keith's talking about, there is an awareness here of feeding ourselves in this country and balancing this. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Okay. Next person is Elijah Williams comes up. He can introduce himself from Greensboro. His role, you said it yesterday, Elijah, but a little bit of history here. Again, remember Elijah and the city of Greensboro on the SOC have done a really good job. They've worked with the department. I think it's a success story of at least working to get source contamination down from the hundreds down to the 30s or maybe even 10, Elijah. But that's not why you're here. The day here is as we look forward to a permitting process. You guys issue permits of different kinds too, to industrial users or even stormwater. You gave us a letter that had 5 things in it about permitting. And I just want to follow up a little bit of that and get your opinion as to whether you believe we have a role or should consider ourselves in a role in the future or not. So.
Thank you, Chairman Solomon and members of the Environmental Management Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. As was stated, my name is Elijah Williams. I'm the Water Reclamation Division Manager for the City of Greensboro's Water Resources Department. And I'm invited to speak today about our National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System Permit Challenges. As a commission, you have been delegated your authority to issue NPDES permits to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ. The purpose of my message is to convey some concerns related to our permit renewal journey. And in hearing our issues, hopefully the commission can consider its role in permitting and the opportunity to take a more active role in the process. And so I'm going to skip a little bit. We talked yesterday about our SOC, and even before then, 2015 through 2019, we were able to, through voluntary efforts, reduce 1,4-dioxane discharges into the TZ Osborne Water Reclamation Facility, or TZO, by over 50%. But because we had some exceedances, because we had some exceedances in 2019, we did voluntarily work with DEQ to do a special order by consent. The initial and primary goal of the amended SOC was for downstream water intakes to never exceed the EPA health advisory of 35 micrograms per liter. And the numbers that we had was, year one, was 35 micrograms per liter. Year two was 31.5, and year three was 23 micrograms per liter. As you heard yesterday, we're still voluntarily using 23 micrograms per liter as a action level for us. I'm glad to report that we had no compliance value exceedances over year two or year three, and that was able to achieve that goal. But in May of 2022, Greensboro received an initial pre-draft NDPDS permit or permit from DEQ dated March of 2022. That included the following 1,4-dioxane permit limits: a monthly average of 0.54 micrograms per liter and a daily maximum of 1.15 micrograms per liter. There was a scheduled compliance with a final compliance date of August 1st, 2029. Those limits were based on the proposed 0.35 micrograms per liter in-stream target value, or ISTV. It's important to note that current commercial laboratory detection is 1 microgram per liter. This means that laboratories cannot accurately test for 1,4-dioxanes below that value. As a result, the pre-draft set 1,4-dioxane permit limit at the value cannot be accurately tested for. Faced with that draft permit limits that we were unable to meet or measure, Greensboro hired an environmental law firm for possible permit adjudication. A year later, in June of 2023, DEQ approached Greensboro with a proposed revision of the permit limits based on a different calculation methodology. A monthly average of 4.99 micrograms per liter and a daily maximum of 14 micrograms per liter. Note that the monthly average of 4.99 is an order of magnitude higher than the 0.54 from the initial pre-draft in 2022. Permit limits was based on the same 0.35 micrograms per liter ISTV. DEQ moved the compliance point for Greensboro to the water supply 4 upper boundary instead of in the pipe, based on the Jordan Lake Rules definition of water supply 5. Although the law had not changed since 2022, DEQ proposed an entirely different 1,4-dioxane level in a permit that it had in 2022. In July of 2023, DEQ staff mentioned new methodology for the water quality standard calculation at the EMC Water Quality Committee meeting. We were at attendance, Greensboro was. No specific NDPDS permit limits were included in the presentation, and no specific calculations was included in the presentation. In August of 2023, DEQ requested additional meeting with Greensboro to further discuss the permit limits. They proposed limits at 56 MGD, which is our current rated flow, 5 micrograms per liter, and a daily maximum of 7.5 micrograms per liter, 1.5 times the monthly average, or 10 micrograms per liter, 2 times the monthly average. If we were to upgrade to 60 MGD, those numbers would be 4.7 micrograms per liter with a daily maximum of 7 micrograms per liter, or 9.4 micrograms per liter. So on May 1st, which happened to be the day after the SOC ended, Greensboro received a second pre-draft permit from DEQ that included the following 1,4-dioxane limits: a monthly average of 5.0 micrograms per liter and a daily maximum of 10 micrograms per liter. There was a schedule of compliance with final completion date of May 1st, 2027, originally in the first pre-draft, August 1st, 2029. Greensboro will be unable to consistently meet the final limits that was proposed without installation treatment technology. And you received that information. It ranges between $330 million and $1.3 billion to meet. You also saw yesterday that some of our numbers in the last year was over that 5, and that's been even after that time. Due to unregulated discharges, 1,4-dioxane and TZOs receiving waters and other factors, source reduction alone will not be effective to consistently meet the proposed limit. Greensboro continues to partner with, I'm sorry, let me go back. Sorry about it. The point I'm trying to convey is DEQ presented Greensboro with a wide variety of daily maximum and monthly average permits for 1,4-dioxane over the past few years, all seemingly based on the same proposed ISTV of 0.35 micrograms per liter. Greensboro continues to partner with Ashburn and Reedsville to legally challenge the administrative process DEQ has used to develop and implement 1,4-dioxane NPDES permit limits without the development of a proper fiscal note. Along the way, there was never an opportunity to come before this commission with our draft permit concerns. The only avenue available to us was a legal challenge. I think it would be safe to say that Greensboro would have welcomed the opportunity to come before this commission at several points in this journey if that avenue would have been available to us. Thank you again for letting me share this information.
Thank you, Elijah. And I know no good deed goes unpunished by writing a letter, but you did get in the record, and I thought that was a place we could start. There's other stories like that. There's good stories, bad stories, but I do think they've been working together, and I do think the SOC, for its initial intent, got them there. But I appreciate your comments on the permits, and I assume when we take this committee, you'll have some other insights you could probably provide us.
Yes,
as well
sir.
as a permit.
Thank you.
Okay. Last speaker is either John Nichols or Paul Calamito from Brunswick County. And it's Paul Calamito. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Paul. And I will keep it on Brunswick County, but you may have some other comments. Let me ask you for those when you finish with the Brunswick County story, maybe about other things you see outside of North Carolina. Your call. You go.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. First, let me thank you for your service. You address very challenging, important issues for our state. My name is Paul Calamito. I'm general counsel to the North Carolina Water Quality Association, statewide group of local government, public water, sewer, stormwater utilities. I'm here to support an EMC discretionary opportunity for you to review permits that you might take interest in. I have in mind a very abbreviated process with statements of position and either a hearing or not a hearing, depending on your pleasure and what the issues are before you. So in other states, there are these very streamlined opportunities, discretionary like Supreme Court review, in case something attracts your attention. For example, the last item you had before you was the legislature took a shot at writing permits, right? And that might be something, it's DEQ, it's an issue of first impression. When those first permits come, those might be something you may want to look at. Controversial permits, other state EMCs have decided that we'd like a second bite at the record that might go to review. So if it's a controversial permit that you anticipate litigation over, it gives you an opportunity. If you don't think the record is the record that you want the administrative law court and courts to deal with, you get a second bite at it. So that's an attractive reason. My clients, my local government clients are stakeholders. There's many other stakeholders. There's nothing we like worse than feeling like the agency, whatever the agency is, didn't fully appreciate our comments or mis-summarized them and maybe didn't give us an answer. And so that would be an opportunity if somebody really felt that their timely public comments were not properly considered. Also, DEQ has a lot of permitting flexibility, compliance schedules, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. There's a lot of permitting flexibility. You heard yesterday on PFAS. Do we have 2 tiers, 5 tiers, 12 tiers? Those are things that may not be in the regulations that you would have an opportunity to weigh in on. Just having that process, I feel also, and this is the Brunswick County, just having the opportunity to come to you folks I feel will level the playing field a bit with DEQ and some of the permittees. For example, I have clients who are desperate for permits, and sometimes they are forced, because of timing considerations, to take conditions that are not right. I've done this 31 years. I work for the public. We're not trying to make money. We work for poor people who are on fixed income and low income. That's what we care about. And sometimes the permits are just not right, but because of the timing and we needing to construct something, we have to take permits, and we can't take 2 years and the cost, quite frankly, to go to the administrative law court. And I know the non-domestic dischargers are in the same boat. They may need to change a process line. And so having a streamlined opportunity for you at your discretion to look at, I think would be important. On the Brunswick County side, 5 years ago, we had a permit to construct a PFAS removal technology facility, and we included a diffuser, and we had the proper diffuser dilution study done, and we were given 3 dilutions, which was less than 10% of what the study said it should have been. We got 0 technical response as to why we got 3 instead of the 47 number. But we couldn't appeal it because we needed to start building the PFAS removal facility. So that's the type of example. Also, I had another situation where we felt a permit should be issued and it wasn't issued, and we had to go to the administrative law court. I would have much rather come talk to you folks about whether that permit should just be processed. It wasn't like it should have been issued. We just wanted the department to go through the process. It'll avoid the costs. We recently had an appeal of the administrative law court. It took us 2 years. We got very reasonable, the agency, and this wasn't DEQ, it was a separate agency, but we got very reasonable results. And the agency just blew off our comments, wouldn't extend the comment period, wouldn't sit down with us. And it took us 2 years and a ton of money and time. I was shocked. And resources, Attorney General resources. Whereas if we could have gone to an administrative body, I think we could have avoided it. It also will keep you out of the General Assembly, right? It gives you another opportunity to tell legislators, no, let that come to the commission, give us a shot at it. Lastly, I'll conclude with, I don't think you can lose. If you adopt this streamlined discretionary review and you don't use it, I think there are some benefits. You know, there will have been some benefits, notwithstanding it not being used, because the agency will know that it could be used. And so I think that will level the playing field a bit. And if you do use it, you're getting advantages out of that, and you're keeping issues out of the administrative law court and, quite frankly, out of the legislature. I will close with, I think I've been in this room 10 times. This is the second or third time I've spoken to you folks. We try not to bother you. The first time I sat in this room, I will never, ever forget. I sat on that side of the room. It was about 15 years ago, and there was some poor businessman who came up and he was trembling. He was a small business person, and he had a permitting issue. So I think, JD, back in the day, you guys did look into permits, because I remember him coming up and saying, I just don't understand why this is happening. Very small business. And the DEQ professional got up and explained to the commission that the reason they wrote his permit that way is they wanted to be ultra conservative. That was the word, ultra conservative. That day, the commission fixed that permit unanimously. It wasn't a political thing. It was just a North Carolina citizen who didn't have a lawyer, couldn't afford to appeal his permit. And if he didn't have that opportunity, I fear maybe his business, I fear for his business and his family livelihood. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Again, members of the commission, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Anyway, I think is important. And I'm going to say this, and Richard, if you will make I don't have anything prepared, but there's 2 sides to every story. And that's not the purpose beside this, is to hear the plus and negative. It is to say, back to the beginning, we have legislative authority, statutory authority to do the permits. We have thrown them over the wall, so to speak, and it's all being done in our name, and we know nothing about it. And so what I'm going to do is take this to the NPDS committee and let the NPDS decide, do we need to do nothing or do we need to do something? And we want participation from any outside, especially DEQ, to help advise on this and work through this. I think it's in DEQ's interest too, because we don't end up at the General Assembly in this stuff and hopefully end up in a few less lawsuits. So, but that may not be where this whole thing goes. But I think it's worth looking at. It's been a long time since it's been looked at by this EMC, and it's probably time to do it. It is time to do it again. So before I stop there, I will say this, by our bylaws, the chair has to take these to committees, and I will tell you that, maybe it's here. Bylaws under Article, Article 14, which Section 4, which talks about conflict of interest, actually, but it talks about the NPDS permit in the committee makeup. You can't have an interest in it's out of federal statute, I believe, but you can't have much of a economic interest in NPDS permitting companies. So we'll verify all that, and I think we're good on that with the committee. But it does say here, the NPDS permit committee will act on all matters involving the issuance of NPDS permits. So that's also where we do variances. So I think by the bylaws, it should go to the NPDS committee. I will reference it there. I've got no deadline. I would like to hear a report in November of where they're at, but let's give them a couple months to work and to look through the stuff I presented you today, information we've got, follow up with DEQ, and see if we need to do something or nothing. So Commissioner Smith.
So since everyone won't be able to participate in the NPDS committee, I just want to mention a few things going in to be thinking about.
Okay.
I think there may be a good case to be made for more commission involvement in general permits. Those are much more similar to rulemaking, and they apply to a category of facilities. Individual permits, there are going to be so many complications, beginning with the fact that if anyone thinks that that's going to expedite rulemaking, or expedite permitting, they haven't been paying attention to what goes on around here. But the bigger problems are going to be process problems. If the commission starts making individual permit decisions, whether as a second step or however that is constituted, we will be making ourselves witnesses in contested case hearings, because we will be creating an additional record for that permit. So think about what this means in terms of individual permits and finding ourselves testifying in OAH about things the commission may add to the record of a permitting decision and the decision itself. Permittees or permit applicants are not the only people who go to OAH. That permit can be appealed by a community group, an environmental organization, happens fairly frequently. So my initial reaction is I think getting the commission as a body involved in individual permitting would be a huge mistake. I don't think that would ultimately be in the benefit of permit applicants. It would not speed the process, and it would involve the commission in legal complications that I don't think will be worth anyone's time. General permits, I think, are a different animal, and that's probably worth thinking about.
And again, we'll take comments when we get in committee. I appreciate those comments, and we'll take them and get Commissioner Tweedy.
I understand the intent of the information item. I think it is important, if the department wants to make a few comments, that they be given a few minutes to do that. If they don't, that's fine, but.
I didn't want to put anybody on the spot because I didn't
understand.
ask them to do formal, but if they want to, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, Julie Grid.
Hi, and I appreciate all the comments made today. And we're not perfect. Okay, we have our struggles. We try and bring it to the commission when we know we have problems. There used to be an MPS permit committee, and we could bring it a little bit more directly and have more conversation. So we would welcome that. But we have things that we need to work on. We need to be more transparent on our modeling, what we do accept, what we don't accept. We do realize that there's some of those things need to get done to make it a better system for our permittees. You know, I do think they do have opportunity to comment, just that when the permit goes out, they have an opportunity to comment. They have an opportunity to write any of the commissioners. They have an opportunity to call Richard and I, and we will sit down and we will work on it. But you do have to understand, we have the environmental groups and we have the permittees. We're somewhere in between there trying to do our job. And we don't always get agreement on permits. So we have to recognize that up front. But we do try our best. All the permits that Elijah from Greensboro is talking about, it's been a process with 1,4-dioxane. And it's an emerging contaminant, and we know it's a process. But we have not, none of those permits were final. We've been trying to work with Greensboro from day one to get this addressed. They were all drafts. They have opportunity to comment. They have opportunity to come in and talk with us. So nothing was said, we didn't say, take this or leave it. We've been working with them. So I want to be just clear, we really do try and work with our permittees, but some of their comments are right and we have made mistakes. And we will always try to do better, and we welcome any information or suggestions from the commission on that.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. And again, I tried to be clear in the beginning. We weren't trying to throw rocks today as much as look at, should we be
Understand.
involved? And I will say this, and it's not an excuse, I won't back up on any of this, but I do know that I've talked to Richard, your MPDS permit staff and staffing is a big challenge. You got a lot of permits, you got a lot of ARPA stuff coming through too. And so it's really not necessarily that, but can we make the process better, or should we be involved in the process to help you, hopefully help you, not hurt you? So.
We appreciate that. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Commissioner Deerhake.
I have served on the MPDS committee, I think as many years as I've been on the EMC.
No, you're on it now.
Yes, I see that.
Yes. You're the past chair, by the way.
No, I would just give you a bit of experience that I've had. We have traditionally just heard MPDS variance requests and renewals of variances. And so the one that stands out in my mind that we've seen multiple times was the Blue Ridge paper color standard for the Pigeon River, the variance for that. And in that case, hearing officers were EMC members. High-profile cases like that, we have occasion, I think I mentioned this yesterday, in high publicity, high interest cases, the committee, the division has often, or the department, could be air or water, has sometimes come to the commission and said, would one of your members serve as a hearing officer? So I think the department always has that option if they want to get us involved at that stage. So
Correct.
please know that.
Thank you.
But
And you'll be on the committee, so you'll be foundational level here. So.
But I certainly understand how complex and time-consuming it could be for EMC members if we worked on individual permits routinely. So thank you.
And I think, and just to comment again, I think what Mr. Calamito said is there needs to be a process worked out where we pick, or they pick, or somehow we're able to screen some of them, but we don't want to get in the business of doing all of them. That's your point, I think.
Or guidelines to the department.
Yeah, exactly. But that's to be worked out, and we may come up and say we don't need to do anything, or we may need to do a lot. I don't know. But Commissioner Ellison, you got any? Okay. Any other comments? So that's referred to committee, and we'll have a MPDS permit committee for the first time in about a year from September. So look for that on the agenda on committee day. And this will be the primary objective. So any other comments from anybody else for the greater good? I think that does our agenda for today, except for comments, and we'll go to director comments now. Am I on the right point, Ellie? I am. Okay. Toby Vinson, comments from you.
This meeting.
What? Everything's good, sort?
Everyone else has plenty to do, plenty after.
Okay, and we missed you yesterday. Will you have anything coming to committee anytime soon from?
We should be there and see you at the next meeting. Got anything to bring to the next meeting?
Okay, very good. Let me get my agenda out here for you. That's what I wanted. All right, so we have directors now that have these names. Abrazinskis was hard enough for me to remember, but now I've got to get Eunice Lee. Adam Eunice Lee, is that right? Is that close?
Yeah, it's you listening.
You listen, I got it, man. And so you're in talking for Michael Scott for Division of Air and Waste Management, updates?
Yeah, for Division of Waste Management.
Yeah.
Just 4 brief updates. Our staff has been working diligently to finalize the utility scale solar decommissioning rules as required by Session Law 2023-58. We hope to have these rules finalized and in public comment late this month or early August. Division staff had pleasure of meeting with members of parliament from the country of Moldova in coordination with the Secretary of State's office in June. That was a good experience. We presented and discussed important topics and subjects like waste management, clean energy, and recycling. Division staff represented or attended the North Carolina Association of Local Health Directors meeting to discuss private well sampling for PFAS and the division resources that we have available. And then finally, our division continues to work with other DEQ programs and the National Park Service on the petroleum releases that have been observed on Buxton Beach at the former naval facility.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. Any questions for Adam? Okay. Director Rogers, water quality.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my comments are in my director notes. You can review those. I do want to update the drought update. It has not gotten better. I will tell you currently, as of this week on July 9th, the Drought Commission reported that 22 counties are now in severe drought, as opposed to 10 that I reported in my notes. We're up to 71 counties that are in moderate drought. So we got some rain in the last little bit, but we need a lot more. I'm not going to say we need a tropical storm, but we do need some additional rain to help with this with the drought season. I also just wanted to note that our efforts to make sure we get materials up, I think we did a little better job this time, and I think everybody felt a bit of relief, and it worked out better for everyone. We'll continue to work on this process. I've had a few conversations with Commissioner Baumgartner about continuing to work on getting a process out so we get these files to y'all in a PDF format and not have to work through Laserfish. We'll follow up on that in the near future as well. Thank you.
Any questions for Director Rogers? I've seen him a lot lately. Anybody? Thank you for all you do. I know we, just like the Water Quality Committee, your division is very active.
Yeah,
right
we
now.
look forward to working with the NPDS committee as well.
Very good. Thank you. Director Abrazinskis, air quality.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning still to everyone. A couple quick updates. First of all, just want to start off by thanking the Air Quality Committee yesterday for hearing several fairly significant rulemakings you'll hear more about moving forward, specifically the emission guidelines for electric generating units and the emission guidelines for the oil and gas sector. Finally, quick ozone season update. Couple with all the hot weather, we get a lot of questions about, well, how's that going? And so far, we've been pretty fortunate. Only 6 ozone exceedances statewide so far in 2024. Finally, in my written remarks, there's a short update on rulemaking related to permit modification review timelines and definitions pursuant to last year's budget bill. We were requested to just provide a brief update on that at this meeting. I didn't have time to give that in the Air Quality Committee yesterday, but that written update is in my written remarks. That's all for today. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, it's not a question, but since you mentioned it and you said you had 6 exceedances, why don't you mention exactly what that means? Because 1 exceedance is not a violation.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. So the form of the ozone standard is the the average of the 3 4th highest values in 3 consecutive years. So you take the 4th highest value at a monitoring site from, say, 2021, 2022, and 2023, you average those 3 values and compare that to the level of the standard. And so that's, if you're over the level of standard with that metric, that's a violation. We do not have any violations of the ozone standard in North Carolina. We're carefully watching Charlotte, but no violations. An exceedance is simply a singular 8-hour average at a monitoring site that's over the level of the standard. And so until you have 4 of those at a monitoring site in a given year and then repeat that over 3 years, then you're potentially going to have some issues.
And am I not correct that we haven't had any violations in quite some years now, correct?
That's correct. I feel ashamed that I don't have the count of the number of consecutive days that we've been in attainment statewide, but it's well over 3,000 at this point. Yeah, we're in good shape statewide for ozone, and you heard the update on fine particles earlier. I forgot my staffing update as well. We're down to 21 vacancies in the Division of Air Quality. That's the lowest vacancy count that we've had at any point in the last 24 months. But our permitting section is still particularly hit hard. 6 of those 21 vacancies are in our permitting section. And that the total vacancy count is down a little bit because we eliminated some vacancies, unfortunately, recently for budget reasons. So we're doing what we can with what we've got. And that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioner Yarborough, we always get you last. Why don't we get you first on commissioner comments? We'll let committee chairs talk as we come around the horn. You ready? You ready for any comments you've got, Commissioner Yarborough?
Yeah, put me on the spot for sure. I'm not used to being first and being last, normal, but I appreciate what this group does. I thought about something today that Mark Twain supposedly said, and it isn't what folks don't know that hurt them, it's what they know that ain't so. If you think about that, that's what social media does to us. And so we appreciate that you bring data to us and make it clarification. It makes a huge difference because it's very difficult to argue with somebody if they actually believe something that ain't so. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Commissioner Yarborough. Commissioner Weiss, and you had a water allocation committee yesterday too, so.
Yes, I did, and Commissioner Yarborough has set a high bar with that pithy quote from Mark Twain that I think is very apropos of these times. We did have a water allocation committee meeting yesterday. No action items. We did have 3 information items, and the staff continues to do a good job of keeping us up to date about what is going on with the IBT process. And I appreciate that. And I was able to be here for most of the day yesterday, listening to presentations to the other committees. And I do very much appreciate all the hard work that DEQ staff across the board is doing to respond to this commission's questions and concerns. So I appreciate that very much. I appreciate Lois and Paula looking out for the commissioners so that we don't get extremely, I think hangry is the word, or upset about our parking passes. Again, I agree with Bill that this commission does have important work to do. We are doing important work. And I am concerned that we are approaching a dereliction of our responsibility to the citizens of North Carolina if we continue to delay moving the surface and groundwater rules related to PFAS and PFOA out for public hearing and comment. And just wanted to go on the record in saying that, again, in the context of listening closely over these past several months of meetings. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Tweedy.
Just continued appreciation to the department and staff for their dedication, hard work, and patience. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
So one sort of process thing and then a more substantive comment. The process thing is yesterday in the Water Quality Committee, I think we faced a sort of parliamentary question that I had not thought about before. And apparently it was also new to our new council, which is whether we can take action in committee or in the commission on an agenda item that was noticed as an information item. And nobody quite knew the answer to that question. The committee chair allowed the motion and there was a vote. So that was fine. I mean, nothing I'm about to say had any impact on the outcome. I do think it would be helpful to get some advice from the AG's office on that, because after I had a chance later to do some very quick and dirty legal research, it appears that North Carolina's open meetings law does not prohibit that at all, that as long as we're in a regularly scheduled meeting, we can add things to the agenda, we can take action on anything that's on the agenda. So we have a lot of scope to do that. So it'd just be helpful for all of us to understand what the rules are under the bylaws and the North Carolina Open Meetings Law, so that if those kind of questions come up again, we can be prepared for them. As I said yesterday, I think it was handled perfectly and the motion was allowed and there was a vote and that was all fine. It was just new to me.
I get your point in your comment, and we'll work on that.
Yeah. So the substantive comment and the follow-up on Commissioner Wheat's statement, I was very disappointed in listening to the Groundwater Committee discussion yesterday and the action the committee took. And I don't want to steal Commissioner Reardon's report from that committee, but the committee recommendation was for the full EMC to only pursue potentially health-based standards for 3 of the 8 PFAS that the department had developed health-based standards for. I sat through the entire committee meeting and didn't hear any substantive flaw identified in the calculation of those standards. There was no contradiction of the bottom line conclusion of the regulatory impact analysis that adoption of all 8 standards would impose no new cost on the state or the citizens of the state, and to the contrary, would actually reduce regulatory burden. So it is somewhat inexplicable to me, given the responsibilities of the commission, that the recommendation from the committee was to only pursue 3 of the 8. If we can't adopt health-based groundwater and surface water standards in a situation where adopting those standards is entirely beneficial, it gives the citizens of the state more knowledge about what is healthy in terms of ingesting these chemicals. It allows well owners to understand whether they have a contamination problem that may affect the health of their family or the function of their farm or the value of their property. It reduces, these standards would actually reduce the level of cleanup required for remediation of these chemicals. If we can't adopt standards in that set of circumstances, it is hopeless to consider adopting standards in the much more common circumstance we're going to be looking at in the surface water standards, where there are going to be costs. There usually are costs, and we have to decide what the balance is between the cost and the benefits, how to keep those costs as low as possible and still meet the environmental and public health goals, and how to allocate those costs between the pollution sources and the people of the great state of North Carolina who are taking their drinking water from the groundwater and the surface waters of this state. So I hope that both the members of the Groundwater Committee and the Commission as a whole will think more about how to move forward with those groundwater standards.
Okay. So let me go this. I appreciate the comments are good. We're going around. You're going to get 2 committee chairs coming up. I just want to say this. I don't want this. This is a long game. I've said this before. This is regulatory. This is rulemaking. We don't have temporary rules to do immediately. This is a long game. We made some progress yesterday. We got through some stuff. I don't want you guys sitting here arguing about it, because we can only speak as a body. We can only speak as a body by our votes. And so there will be time as we move through this that things will suit some people and not suit others, but we're going to work this thing down the middle. That's all I say, because I don't want this to degenerate into something that's not healthy. But I do hear the concerns, and I've heard the concerns on the other side as well. So other opinions, we're going too fast. Some people say we're going too slow. We just have to find a balance. So with that, Commissioner Reardon, Committee Chair. Your opinion.
Thank you, Chairman Solomon. On behalf of the committee, the Groundwater and Waste Management Committee, I want to thank the department for your engagement, what you presented to the committee, your willingness to engage in a very pragmatic and open dialogue. And I think that all the members of that committee really, I know, express the appreciation of having the ability to have that dialogue without judging each other or making comments that are out of context. So we're very thankful for that. But the Groundwater and Waste Committee yesterday had quite a bit of an engaging discussion regarding PFAS and their desire to do what the committee felt was the right thing. The committee did receive a motion yesterday and voted to move forward with regulating PFAS specifically for the compounds PFOA, PFOS, which EPA says likely are carcinogens, and Gen X as well, because of obviously the citizens of this state have struggled with. The motion instructed DEQ to modify the language in RIA to reflect the motion and return the modified RIA to the Groundwater and Waste Management Committee at the next scheduled meeting in September. There was a lot of reservation I heard from the committee members about the context of relaxing the current regulatory process that we have for the other 5 compounds. It was very clear in this committee and actually reiterated by DEQ staff that nothing in any of the work that we were going to do was going to increase or decrease the current public health protection provided by the implementation of the PQL standards. And so I think the committee come to a resolution there to go forward with these 3 compounds, PFOA, PFS, PFS, and Gen X. 2 of those who APA, again, has likely considered as a carcinogen. But I will say this, there were 8 compounds within what was proposed. The committee elected to go forward with 3 of those with concern about the department's desire to relax the current regulatory structure in place for the other 5. This is a long-term deal here. This is going to be long-term. The science is evolving and it's dynamic. And I believe the work of this committee was respectful and very pragmatic, and I'm proud of the work of the committee and as well as the department in this active engagement and dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments individually?
Again, I just appreciate the opportunity to serve in this capacity. I know our committee does. Everyone fully understands and appreciates the role they play and the importance of what they play for the citizens of this state. We all live here. We have family, grandchildren. We want the right thing for the citizens of our state. And I want to thank everybody for participation, even the emails that we received, hundreds of them, people I didn't know that I've learned to know, I guess. But it's exciting to see people aware, engaged, and wanting the right thing for the citizens of this state. And so do we. Thank you.
Mr. King, personal committee report or
A committee report
Okay,
from
very good.
yesterday to fill those in who were not listening in and are not on here in the room. We had 2 action items yesterday on the agenda. The Division of Mitigation Service Rules required to go through a periodic review and expiration of existing rules, the process. They did that yesterday, and the rule review follows the procedural mandate of a statute or state law 2013413, House Bill 74 incorporated into it, that Administrative Procedure Act. Staff recommended the initial determination to be necessary for the 9 rules in subchapter 02R. The request was unanimously approved to proceed to EMC in September. If you wish, on your agenda, Mr. Chairman, and the staff will conduct a public comment period that the staff could go out and conduct a public comment period on the report with this initial determination. The second one was DWR requested approval to proceed to the EMC with wastewater flow rate modifications as directed by State Law 2023-137, Section 18. The request modifies the April 2024 Water Quality Committee request by clarifying that the 15A NCAC 02T rule modification applies to wastewater systems serving 2 or more dwelling units. OSBM approved the RIA in June 6. Request was unanimously approved to proceed to the EMC in September. for that. There were 3 information items on the agenda. I will not spend long on either one of them. I'm trying to get this done in about 3 minutes. It was 3 hours yesterday.
We heard most of it.
Yes, we have.
All of us did.
So yes, we have. Information items, I wanted to talk on this one just a second. I can give a report. The DWR reported that the semi-annual progress report for 1.4 docks in the Cape Fear River Basin was mandated by the final statement settlement agreement, for the adoption of the City of Greensboro's revised special order of consent for 1.4 docks. And we heard some good on that today, some really good reporting on that, and have good representation here from that. But the EMC directed the DEQ at the time to supplement its studies of point source discharges in the Cape Fear River Basin for a period of 3 years. The supplement includes semi-annual progress reports to the DEQ for a period of 3 years to the Water Quality Committee. So that's what that was there. Division of Water Resources updated the committee on Session Law 2023-137, which directs the EMC to review 15A NCAC 02B rules, 208 rules, standards for toxic substances, temperature, to determine if the standards and methodologies for establishment of water quality criteria or specific pollutants included in the information, scientifically sound, protective of human health and the environment. With that, questions have come up. We need to work on this real quickly, and I've asked Commissioner Ellison to come up with a group. I did that yesterday, and he's working on that with Karen Higgins and her team to review and bring proposals to nail down this state directive to our September Water Quality Committee meeting. And Commissioner Ellison and has a couple of people that he's going to put on his team, and Karen, and that will we'll try to nail that narrative piece down.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've got one real quick one. I'll finish up. Continue with PFAS surface water quality rules development. That's been brought up already. Thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate your concern. The trying to stick with bylaws that I think it's 9, section 9 in the bylaws that require committees to be consistent with procedures of the commission. We just discussed that with Director Rogers, and we try to do that early on. We started this process about a week after our last meeting for the agenda today, and due to vacations and holidays, we of course got behind the 8 ball and tried to get the notice out. And the draft, the RI draft, was in draft form. And all of those came yesterday to our meeting. It was unusual to take as chair, to take the merits of the agenda as a information item and move on that. And I felt like the merits to bring this to where it is today, to allow the motion and the second and discussion. And that was voted down. It was a recommendation from the department that we move forward to the EMC. And there was a substitute motion. And that motion was approved. And so we are moving forward to take that. The information and motion was allowed to move the department's recommendation to full EMC. The motion was defeated. Motion in this effort was deferred and passed, that we move the information to September meeting. Quick update on the trainer review. I've also discussed that. We know that trainer review and the 1.4 together is what I think was originally proposed, working on that. Discussed that with Director Rogers. When the July agenda was put together. The department said that the RA still needs some work and supporting documents need some work. But we're moving as best we can with that to get it back to the committee and move forward with that. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Very thorough.
Appreciate you.
Commissioner Duggan, Air Quality Committee.
Yes, yesterday I had the opportunity to lead the Air Quality Committee meeting. I'd like to thank the staff for their preparations for it. We heard two information items, one from Ms. Quinlan regarding the emission guidelines for greenhouse gas emissions, which will be coming before the board or before the Air Quality Committee. Let me see, I had the date here and I just lost it. Will be coming before the Air Quality Committee in November, the draft rules for that. And then we'll be hopefully in front of or coming out of committee to be before the full EMC in January. That was a very interesting presentation and I thank her for that. The second presentation that we listened to is from Ms. Burleson regarding revisions to the permit rules to incorporate pre-permitting activities. Again, that will likely come out of the committee at the next meeting and then before the entire board in January. On the personal level, again, I'd like to thank Ms. Thomas for her diligent help with me for the minutes and getting me in line with those minutes. I'd like to thank staff. I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners for all the conversations I've had while I'm here. I continually enjoy the conversations that we have and I learn from each one of them. So I thank you all. Thank you.
Mr. Ellison. Anything?
Appreciation to the chair for bringing, again, another perspective. We had the OSBM representative last meeting and to hear from the regulated public and their representatives. Just, I think we all love staff and respect and appreciate staff, but I think it's good to hear some of these other perspectives. I think it's informative. On the PFAS, in the Water Quality Committee meeting, perhaps that meeting could have gone better. It is what it is, but it is complicated. We got a lot of documentation late in the meeting cycle, and we are working hard. As a smart man once told me, march to victory, you don't rush to failure. And I think and the department also, I think we all want to get this right and make sure that the PFAS rules and standards are protective of the state and are an asset to the whole state of North Carolina. So that was it.
Very good. Commissioner Deering, anything to add?
Thank you. I appreciate your going around the table and letting us say a few words. And I will just, I guess, repeat the sense of frustration that I have with the pace at which the PFAS standards are moving. I do appreciate the opportunity to introduce a motion yesterday, Mr. Chairman of the Water Quality Committee. Thank you. I think the RIA was ready for us. We had 2 weeks to review it. I think we also need to bear in mind the weight that this commission is giving the fiscal analysis process for a federally mandated health-based standard. We have to keep costs in the proper context of health-based standards. We're here to protect the citizens of the state's health. I will add that because of the pace at which this is moving with PFAS, we're not getting other business done. We aren't seeing the triennial review, and now we are past our deadline to turn it into EPA for that. We meet 6 months a year. I think you may not know that this body met 9 months out of 12 a year from 2013 and earlier. It's a lot of work to do, but it's still not the level of work that was done at that time when we were meeting 9 months a year. We used to have to decide on contested cases. And you think you see a lot of volume of paper now? You should have seen those contested cases dockets. That all being said, when we sign up to work on this commission, we're volunteering, we understand. We have other jobs to do. I appreciate sensitivity to the time we have available, but when we sign up to work on this commission, we are committing to serve the citizens of this state and work in a timely fashion on the health-based needs, the environmental needs of this state to ensure a better quality of life for the people in this state. So thank you for letting me say that, and I wish everybody a good rest of the summer.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Commissioner Carter.
Well, let me start. I want to thank Vice Chair Duggan very much for chairing the meeting yesterday. Both the chair and the vice chair were out of place and unable to participate and so on. And I was involved in a very important personal matter that I had to ask myself for, but I will not go into that at this point. I do want to, Commissioner Duggan has also given a very good report on what we're looking for in air quality. We've got some important things coming up here, both in September and probably more importantly in November at this point. The other thing I wanted at least to comment on is I will say personally, at least, very uncomfortable with what's going on with this so-called, and I'm going to describe it that way, a public records request. I have never seen anything remotely like this in my many years of practice. We're responding to 2 emails to the Department of Justice. I have yet to see any kind of request, public records request to this commission or any member of this commission. It's to say the least irregular. The department has also imposed or tried to impose some requirements that we provide the information that is included in those emails to their public information staff. That to me is completely irregular and should not be done. We're not part of the EMC with respect to public records. They have their own process. In fact, if you go online, you'll find a form that you fill out if you want to file a public records request to the department. It's very specific. Here's how you do it. Here's who it goes to, so on and so forth. We don't have that, and we need something, procedures and process. That's why I had initiated or sent a note around and thank the chair for including that yesterday with the steering committee since I couldn't be there. I think we need to put something in place very quickly to get those procedures and get this thing, this and any other requests handled properly. And if anybody's providing anything currently, that should go to our council and not to the department, anybody at the department. I don't think there's any question about that. And so I would respectfully request that we move quickly to put something in place as far as the bylaws. So you and I can talk about that further later in terms of schedule.
You may not know this, but you weren't here yesterday.
No.
So you got put on kind of a little working team with me and Commissioner Duggan and you to work with Ellie to kind of come up with some of this for the next meeting for the steering committee. So you're volunteered. You really volunteered yourself.
Well, I figured that was going to follow. I knew that. I know how that works, and especially when the chair has the authority that you have.
We also heard today that you were from up there and around High Rock Lake. So we took interest in that too. So we'll talk about that after the meeting as well. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Thank everyone. And I would repeat some of the other comments here. It is a very good experience, and I'm not the senior member of this commission at this point, but I'm pretty close to that. The senior member sitting next to me, and it's been on a number of years now. And this has, been a very excellent experience and continues to be. And I look forward to continuing.
Mr. Bumgarner.
I agree with Commissioner Yarborough. By the time it gets around the horseshoe, about everything's been said, so I'll kind of leave it there. But I just want to echo Commissioner Reardon's statements about groundwater yesterday too. So that's it.
Council, welcome. Ellie Young, welcome to the show, right?
I just want to thank all the commission members for welcoming me, especially Chair Solomon, and I look forward to working with you all.
Okay, very good. My final words, a couple here, is it's important to reflect back. I think I talked about this last time. Last November, I think 8 of 15 of us had been on here right at a less than a year. Some of you have only been on one meeting last November. One of the goals for me for the first half of the year was to get everybody first oriented in December, because we've done that before, and to try to get this group gelling and communicating. And I know you go back and forth with the sausage made, but this team has come together a long way. We've been kind of baptized by fire, and to support what Commissioner Deerhake says, or Commissioner Carter or Keene, until you sit in the chair, you don't really appreciate how much work there is to do. And I think you folks that have only been here a year or so really figure out how much reading and writing and phone calls and everything else you do. So I think Commissioner Deerhake gave a warning that we all need to do it. I would say I think a lot of you have learned to do it or learned what's required now. And we have big stuff coming up over the next 12 to 18 months. So it's not going to slack up. It's going to keep going. I want to say I appreciate each one of you guys. I gave my weekend up July 4th, and I gave my weekend after July 4th up to read all of these documents that we had. I know a lot of you did, because some of you were calling me or texting me and did to have this or that. And I really appreciate that. I know a lot of you gave up your own personal time with your families last week to get ready for the meetings. And I really, really appreciate that from each of the commission members. I want to also thank Keith Larrick, Elijah Williams, and Paul Calamito for coming in today. I agree with Commissioner Ellison. It's good to hear perspective. It's not always easy to come before this commission and get perspective, but I appreciate people's willingness to do it at all levels and from all walks of life, because that's what we need to hear. So I thank them. And I think that's probably it, guys. I just want to thank you. I think we're making good progress, and we're going to keep working each of these items steadily, but we're going to keep making progress. So thank y'all. Yes, Commissioner Smith.
I thought you might mention this at the end, but since you didn't, I think it might be helpful for you to let all the commission members know about the change in policy with respect to remote participation in the meetings.
Yeah, the only thing, additionally, we have had live-only meetings. We have altered that to some degree in the past. I think we've had a couple meetings where we were all here, some were remote. This particular meeting, the people that were going to be gone, I let them know we weren't going to do for the next rest of this year. We've got too many debates, and we have talked about how hard it is to manage the remote. So I want people to be here. I want to hear the debates. I want us to go through everything. It is hard to manage when everybody's all over the world making phone calls. As we could see from our technology yesterday, we got 30 minutes late. So I know that hurts feelings. I also remind everybody, you've got attendance policies here. And that's what we talked about. We didn't talk about it in detail, but you miss so many meetings and you're off the commission. So there are attendance requirements. So we need to work through that, and that's going to be part of the bylaws, but let's all be here live as we go through these important debates going forward. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Carter.
Civil remissions at 1.
Civil remissions at 1. You have about 20 minutes to eat and get out of the way if you're in civil remissions, okay? Thank the applicant for being here as well. We're dismissed. Yeah, meet it here for civil remissions.
So, all we gotta do is skip 30 days.